Hey there, all you beautiful Texans. Welcome back to the James Show. It's News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3. I know, good to see you too. I know, I hadn't talked to you in a couple days. It's been a while. Well, there's a lot going on, and I know you think the number one thing going on right now is the election, and that probably is true from our own little myopic American perspective. But outside of our borders, we're getting really close to World War III. Let's talk to my first guest, Dr. Jeffrey Brodeur. He's a retired colonel. Do I have all that right with Rigaku? Did I say that correctly?
Rigaku. Yes, sir. Rigaku Analytical Devices.
Well,
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
I've had you guys on many times. You think I'd know how to say it by now because you're a great guest. But I'm just as guilty as anybody. I'm all swept up in election fever, and then I see the world news, and Israel struck Iran on Friday night. I'm surprised that's not a bigger headline. What did I miss?
You didn't. On first look, it looks like a nothing sandwich, right? But there's really a lot to unpack here. Israelis' counterattack is in response to that missile barrage a couple weeks ago, I think 108 or 118, that landed vicinity of some major cities and ports in Israel, largely, off target and minimal damage. And it looked like Israel just counterattacked some military facilities in Iran, focusing on ballistic missile production that is the nemesis of the Middle East right now, and a number of countries, and the deployment platforms, the missile, the launchers. But what you don't understand, what most people don't understand, is the Iranian military is trained, organized, and equipped to protect the homeland. They are not expeditionary. They're not trained or skilled, nor do they have the supplies to go outside of their borders to do much. And that's why their fast boats don't go beyond the flagpole. And that's why when they want to reach out, they use proxies or they use these long-range missiles. Israel, on the other hand, conducted a strike at night, early morning, I think, using breathers, not missiles, but state-of-the-art jets supplied by the United States.
Well, what's a breather?
A breather is a weapon system that actually breathes, right? So you send a pilot in a jet. There's a breather controlling that jet.
Oh, so it's like a non-drone. There's a human being in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and that's important to commanders because, sometimes the target moves, or sometimes you change your mind and you don't want to strike, or you want to strike a different target. If you launch a missile, it's addressed to whom it may concern at that grid point where it's going. It can't change. You can't change its mind. So it gives you much more flexibility if you send a breather or a fighter jet or a bomber or something along those lines. That allows you to change your mind all the way up until the very last minute. And what Israel was successful doing is deploying in the early at night, right before daybreak, and across international lines, and they neutralized the air defense systems of Iran, and they successfully, with strategic precision, neutralized all the targets on their list. That's huge.
What was the casualty list?
I don't know that there is a number of people. All I know is in the open source, Israel said that they struck every target they intended to. Iran initially said something like that there was a lot of damage, but then they toned that down and minimized it. But here's what Iran can't tone down, and this is the real danger and the message to this story. Israel now, because they were able to neutralize air defense and strategically hit any place in Iran, they can do at any time they want to, and Iran cannot defend against it. They cannot go nose to nose.
How come there were no shots fired at the planes?
That's because those air defense artillery systems were neutralized. In fact, think of two different strike packages, air strike packages. One goes in. You normally have a platform that will identify whatever the detection mode is for that ADA, radar or whatever it is. That'll pinpoint the location, and then You have another jet that'll fire off munitions to eliminate it. All of those were neutralized. So the second wave of bombers could come in and strike their targets. I mean, an amazing feat, thinking that they started from several international boundaries away. They started out at night, and they returned during the daytime.
Well, and if they managed to do all that without casualties, that sounds too good to be true. Certainly someone had to be hurt, but other than that, it sounds like a successful strike and almost perfect.
It was outrageously successful. I would tell you.
Well, that's a wild story.
And it puts Iran on notice that a couple of things it does. It puts Iran on notice that Israel can reach in and strike any target inside their border anytime, any day they want.
Yeah, their air defenses are worthless.
So sleep with one eye open. And the second thing it does to Iran is it slows down the production and the distribution of those long and mid-range missiles to all of their proxies, right? The Al-Houthi making themselves a nemesis there just south of Yemen. Right. Hamas in Gaza, and then the Houthis, the
Hezbollah.
Forget the name. Hezbollah up in Lebanon.
Well, that's a fantastic story. Dr. Jeffrey Brodeur, I wish we had more time. Tell them about how they find your work outside of WBAP.
On LinkedIn, last name is Brodeur, seeking your endorsement to be the next Secretary of Homeland Security. Thank you, sir.
All right. Well, that would be sweet. Now, the big story of the day outside of the American borders is the Israeli response to Iran. They had a pretty successful attack from all accounts that we've heard thus far on Friday night, and it's not really getting a whole lot of play in the headlines. Sort of disappointing. It sounds like a much bigger deal than it is. That's why we're talking about it today with David Hamilton from America's Future Series. And I mean, David, I obviously we're all swept up in election fever, but if it wasn't the election time, I think this would be the top story of the day.
Well, it should be, absolutely. That and, of course, the ongoing bloodshed in Ukraine. This is very interesting news because the Israelis were very successful. They hit a number of military and other strategic targets, in particular ones that have some connection with uranium development. In 2016, one of those sites was found to have uranium residue. So it's nice to see that happening. But what's interesting is also they have not been targeting Iran's oil production, and that still is a card. They could knock out most, if not all, of their refineries and their oil production if they chose to. And I think that's what's causing the Iranian regime, through the mouthpiece of Hamas, to start talking about negotiations seriously. So Hamas now suddenly is interested in negotiating the release of the hostages for Israel withdrawing from Gaza, but I don't think that's going to happen because at this late stage, I don't think the Israelis have any interest in that. They are now fully committed to driving Hamas out of Gaza and killing every single one of their leaders, if at all possible.
I mean, how ironic would that be if from the river to the sea it ended up being Israel?
Yeah, Israel will at least drive from Gaza to the sea, maybe, right, as far as they want to go.
So we have that escalation. Do you think it's going to stop here? Because I see the headlines that says Iran already vows a response to Israel's attack. I mean, are they really going to have a response that, is an escalation or just kind of like a flashy show like they did back in, what was that, April, when they just launched a whole bunch of rockets and drones?
Yeah, I don't even think they'll do that because I think actually the Iranian regime is worried about its own survival at this point. So if they were fully committed to this, they would. They launch a couple hundred missiles, 100 or so missiles again. They would do that sort of thing. But I don't think they're going to do that at this point because I think they've figured out that Israel is completely committed to doing whatever it takes to win this, and that they don't really care anymore and can't afford to care what America or other countries say. Israel has finally come to the conclusion that it's on its own. If America is along for the ride, great. Otherwise, this is an existential threat for them, and they have no choice but to put a stop to this.
Well, I mean, look, even if they wanted to do it, if the Ayatollahs wanted to do it, wouldn't a general turn to him and say, dude, we tried that in April, and they shot all 200 of them down. What do you want to do? Just get them shot down again? It's not going to do anything.
That's also part of the calculus. The threat of things is often worse than the reality, and they have a very poor launch rate, and they have a pretty high blow-up rate right after they launch, and so they're hitting their target rate is very, very low, and they know that, and so they tend to not want to embarrass themselves. So I don't see a big retaliation. I see the Hamas saying that they want to negotiate and that they're going to try to get a ceasefire, and they'll put pressure on Israel to have another ceasefire. Israel will ignore that, and I think by Christmas, I would expect Gaza to be completely rid of all of Hamas.
Well, David, does the election have any effect on that?
It should. It has a negative. It has had a negative impact. We haven't been focusing on this as much because this is not the sort of thing you want to talk about during an election.
Yeah, it feels icky, but it counts.
Yeah, well, yeah. The press, the mainstream press, is not terribly interested in this. We're not hearing about all the attacks. We didn't hear about the 77 plus attacks on Americans in the region since October 7th, and this is the sort of thing that we keep a little bit on the down low.
So, what about the escalation over with Russia and Ukraine? I believe last week when we talked, North Korea had sent some troops. Do we know anything more about the magnitude of that cooperation?
Largely for show. It's demonstrating, they're signaling to us that this is getting tiresome, costly, that they're willing to escalate, and it is, I think, our job to respond to them. And we have been the country largely not willing to negotiate a negotiated settlement. Basically, no Ukraine in NATO and no Russia in Ukraine. That's the calculus. Hey, Russia leave and Ukraine will not join NATO. And they will probably want to keep maybe the southern part, southeast part, the Donetsk and the Donbass, one or two of those. They're definitely going to keep Crimea. And I would like to say that most Americans would say they keep Crimea and this war ends, and we go back to the status quo before this war. Most Americans would say that's in our national best interest, and it's actually in the best interest of the Ukrainians to stop all the bloodshed.
Wait, so Crimea ended up with Ukraine or Russia?
It would end up with it is currently occupied by Russia and has been for quite some time. One of the arguing points on our side is, well, you've got to get up Crimea, and they're saying, no, we're not going to do that. Let alone part of the occupied area, which is slightly north and east of that, which is called the Donetsk and the Donbass, most of which is ethnically Russian and linguistically Russian, and many of those people want to be Russian. So if I'm not Ukrainian, I'm not Zelensky, I don't get to say, but if it was me, I would give up the Russian part of Ukraine and call it a day.
Dude, I would put Borat in charge of that area before I sent $200 billion again. David Hamilton, tell them about America's Future Series, what y'all got going on.
Yeah, we're a nonpartisan think tank and speaker series. We're focused on U.S. global competitiveness and national security. We host a dual-use technology summit down in Austin during South by Southwest. I hope people will check out our website. That's coming soon. We'll have some more, as you and I call them, rubber chicken dinners, right, raising money for military causes. We're going to honor Admiral McCraven on September 13 of next year.
All right. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate the expertise. David Hamilton, America's Future Series.
Thank you.
Coming up next, Brent Sadler is on the James Show to cover the story that, Brent, I just checked Fox News about 30 minutes ago, and it's not anywhere on the front page. You have to go down to where it just lists some other stories that are going on, and it's just like one line of text. So what I thought maybe on Friday night might have been the opening salvo of World War III. Boy, this thing has been memory hold real quick.
No, absolutely. I mean, we are focused in on national elections and all the stories and politics that are going around and all the, rumor mongering and hopefully an October surprise that everyone's kind of hanging on to, that we're missing what's going on in the rest of the world. It was the big attack that really kind of wasn't, but we may still see something from Iran in the coming days.
Well, it also, maybe we need to wait before we have an opinion on this one because it sounds too good to be true. Israel just came out and they took out every little piece of equipment that is in their air defense forces between them and the target, and then they took out the targets, and then they came back and they didn't lose a person, and we have no reports of casualties on the other side. I mean, I think we're going to get the rest of the story in the coming days.
No, absolutely. I mean, what we know right now is that Israel focused in on military targets, the ballistic missile, mixing of like the solid rocket fuel for it. It's kind of like a bottleneck in that production line. It's no surprise either that they went after the S-300 radar systems that the Russians procured or provided to the Iranians. And so Iran right now is basically defenseless against further follow-up attacks by Israel. So it's probably caused them to blink. But again, it's no surprise they were insisting on meetings with the Russians on delivery of a more advanced radar system just months ago, the S-400.
Well, look, what's Iran supposed to do in retaliation? Last time, what was that, back in April when they launched like 200 rockets and drones and whatever, all of them got shot down. So, I mean, what can they even try and do?
Yeah, every time Iran does this, it just makes them look more inept. The first salvo, almost 200 missiles and drones and cruise missiles, that was in April. Then they did it again in 1st of October, very close to 200 ballistic missiles alone. So a very significant escalation on their part. And still, they didn't really land a significant hit. The only person that unfortunately died was a Palestinian civilian from rocket debris that fell on him. So if the Iranians were to attack again, they would do it knowing that Israel would have the gloves off, and they have very little to defend against or defend with.
Well, look, you have a Navy background. The Navy seems to have an increased role as of late. They've come within like whatever the international waters or boundaries are, or within missile range. How much has the Navy stepped up in the last year or so?
Well, I'm one to think that the real game is in the Western Pacific, and better use of military assets out that way. Using an Army and Air Force could definitely signal this much the same message to the mullahs in Tehran. But right now we got a carrier strike group that's in the Arabian Sea ready to strike should the Iranians take a shot at us, which I find highly unlikely because they know that would be a red line that would draw the U.S. in directly, and it would just add on even more punishment that they're not ready to take. The regime in Tehran is very brittle.
All right, what should I be asking about? What does the common person here in North Texas not know about this conflict that they should?
What is going to be the strategic outcome of this? Will Iran continue to rely on its partners and funders in Beijing and Moscow? If Israel actually did what I suspect were targets that would further drive a wedge between Iran and its supporters, then I think we're going to start to see this war in the Middle East take a turn to probably an end that will last for a long time. But if this is just a tit-a-tat back and forth, we still have a long way to go.
All right, Brent said that, and that's a technical military term. Do not at me on that one. Brent, how do they find your work outside of WBAP?
Yeah, go to heritage.org and look me up, Brent Sadler, or you can find me on X at Brent D. Sadler.
Thank you. Brent Sadler, Heritage Foundation, on the James Show. Appreciate it, sir.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. All right, let's go to the phones. Anita, Waco, you're next up on WBAP. Your experience early voting. Go.
Hi, I voted on Friday in Johnson County, and they did something unusual that I haven't seen before.
Ooh, do tell.
When they handed me the paper ballot, and she laid out 3 ballots on the table, and she said, you can pick any one you want, and they're all the same.
Like pick a card, any card?
Yes.
I don't get it.
So I said, okay. So I picked one. And then when we turned in our ballots, apparently they don't have a tabulation machine that's computerized. We put it in a box with a slot in it. And there were some people sitting next to the box doing some work on the table. So I don't know if they were hand tabulating or not. And there was no one for me to ask. So I thought that was interesting, to just slide it in a box that kind of looked like a trash can.
Yeah, we had that when I had voted in what was it, Plano, like 20 years ago. They had what was, I guess the closest comparison would be like the Scantron test that we took in high school and college with the Scantron machines, where you fill out in pencil and then you put it in a machine, it goes. So it does count it on the computer, and there's also a paper ballot. But yeah, that's I haven't even heard of a report of one of those yet. That's not what you had.
No.
Okay.
And I have another question. Tell me what you think.
Okay.
So we can send people to the moon, but we can't figure out in America how to make sure everybody only has one vote. Here's my solution.
Of course we can.
When somebody sends me money on Cash App, it is instantly within a second on my phone. So there's no reason why when I walk up there, they can't put in, now can't be my name, because people have same names, but everybody only has one Social Security number. Everybody's Social Security number is different. There's no reason they couldn't put in my phone number, my Social Security number, type, put it in, and it goes instantly into something, a thing called a database, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And there could be one for the whole United States. So if I vote in Johnson County on Friday, my number goes in there, and within seconds, it is tabulated that person voted. So I can't go now drive to Oklahoma and drive to Arkansas and drive to New Mexico and
look,
California.
I don't think that's a whole lot of what's happening is some dude driving around. I mean, maybe some of them are, but I think for the most part, you're getting the people who aren't voting, the people who are already dead or they haven't voted in the last 8 elections, and so you can pretty much safely assume that they're not going to now, and getting ballots in for those people. I think that's the more likely threat there, and. It's not that I'm against your database idea. It's just that we don't have federal elections. We have state elections. So instead of Social Security numbers, let's use your Texas driver's license, whatever your state driver's license number is. And if you don't, they have an ID card. But yeah, do the database at the state level. And maybe if you have to cross-reference the databases to make sure people aren't going across state lines. I like that. I bristle at anything when you centralize an election, because we're specifically by the Constitution are supposed to have 50 different elections or however many states we have. You know what I'm saying?
Yes, but when problems start, then you've got to figure out some way to solve it. You have to.
Well,
for example, my husband passed away, and there is a death certificate in Dallas County with his name on it. That should instantly trigger that person going off of the voting rolls in the state of Texas.
Well, you don't have to convince me. And Anita, you're absolutely right. The only reason why people wouldn't want these measures in place is if it helps them cheat. That's it. Period. Point blank. Given the story. And if you think you're fighting Hitler, you think you're fighting Nazis at the Nazi rally at Madison Square Garden, you'll happily look the other way if it prevents Hitler from getting into power. 800-288-9227, 800-288-9227. That was a great report. Hey, give Anita 3 points. That's like a field goal. 3. Thank you very much over there. Garrett's keeping score. All right, more reports from early voting, 800-288-9227. And I'm going to try and start sprinkling in some of the audio from Donald Trump on Joe Rogan. This will take me half the week. There's so much they covered here, and we're not going to play the whole 3 hours, but I'll try and squeeze some of that in next as well. This is The James Show, News Talk 820 WBAP, now on FM at 93.3.